instrumental in turning your eyes toward the career that you eventually pursued? Or how did you make that choice? What happened?
It was a couple of my teachers, starting already in junior high school, said to me that, well, you had elementary. I remember a thing happened in elementary, and I was in kindergarten. My kindergarten teacher gave me a note to take home to my parents, said, I want you to give this to your mother and father. Now, when you got notes from teachers, it usually had some kind of connotation of being bad.
Yes.
And when they read it, the teacher wanted them to come to school and meet with her.
Uh-oh.
And they asked me what this is about, and I didn't have the fog. And I was terrified. I thought there was something real. I had done something bad and didn't know about it. Well, they went, and it turned out she wanted to tell them that in all her years, Mrs. Bracken was an elderly person at that time. She had never seen a child with the artistic ability that I had. She said, he's unbelievable. He draws figures where the hands have fingernails on them. He said, I've never seen a kinder. Usually, it's the circles and the little sticks and the things, and he draws a hand and he puts fingernails on them. And so they were, relieved that it was something very positive, but teachers kept encouraging me to do something with it. And then by the time I got to high school, I had pretty well decided that I wanted to pursue a career in art. And so I went to Pratt Institute, and I was trained as a commercial artist in advertising and illustration. And then I had one big mentor at Pratt, which was Fritz Eichenberg, who was a great commercial artist, book illustrator. And we went out into the field. I graduated and went into advertising, and to this day, the only thing anyone will ever remember of many, many, many pieces I did is that I did create toucan Sam for Kellogg's for Fruit Loops.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that, man.
Yeah. Of course, you sign it away. You don't own the copyright.
That's right,
otherwise,
yes.
I would have been fabulously wealthy with residuals and whatever.
Hey, can you name any of your elementary school chums or high school friends, for that matter?
I still communicate with two of them. We get together. They're in California, but whenever they come east or I've gone west, we get together. They're married. Two of them, these two happen to be married. It was Eric and Wiki Veeler. Let's see, there's Judy Lessem. John Schnabel passed away last year. Who else there? Trying to think. Oh, Nancy Grant. Those are names that come,
Yes, and the fact that we know people from that many years ago is a real plus in your life, because they can remind you of things about yourself that you have long since forgotten.
Right, and vice versa.
And vice versa. This may apply to your living in Manhattan, or it may apply to Queens. Where in Queens, by the way, did you?
It was in Woodside, between 30 and 31st Avenues, and around, I think, 54th Street. It would be the closest, because it was Hobart Street, but 54th, I think, was the first numbered street there.
So therefore, this question may relate to the time in Queens or the time in Manhattan, whichever you.
Manhattan, I was only, I think, for 2 years.
Okay. All right. So then it would be Queens. Can you describe the room where you slept?
Yeah, it was a small bedroom. I remember the walls were like a buff color, and I had a maple bed, and was made of maple. There were pictures all over the walls, mostly my stuff that didn't go on refrigerators, but there were a couple of framed pieces that my father put up. I had liked, even as a young age, I remember liking Norman Rockwell, and so there were a couple of Norman Rockwell reproductions on the wall. And then there was a picture, I can remember this, there were two puppies and a kitten between them.
Neat. Oh, that's great.
And it was a small desk. There was a small desk in there and a small bureau, also in maple. It was, part of the set. Yeah.
Did you have chores that you were responsible for doing
Yeah, when I got older, when then I had to do a certain amount of washing the dishes and putting away stuff. I had I was responsible for my own room, keeping it neat and clean, and making sure there was no garbage and stuff there.
Now, what about your first paying job?
My first paying job. Oh, that was in that was early high school. I delivered clothes for a tailor.
Okay.
To make our mad money and stretch your meager allowance out. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Was there a family holiday, Manny, that was more important to your immediate family, where there was a gathering of the clans or a gathering of?
Actually, our family pretty well stuck to the American holidays. Thanksgiving, everyone got together. Christmas, everyone got together. New Year's. Occasionally, on July 25th, some members of the family would get together. July 25th is St. James's Day. St. James is the patron saint of Spain. Mm-hmm. And he's buried, and most of the Europeans have countries have a patron saint. He's buried in Galicia, where in the city of Santiago, where my which was the home territory of Mom and Dad. And so it's always, even though it's a traditional all Spanish holiday, it's very big in Galicia because there thousands of people, even the Middle Ages, made the pilgrimages to see the site of St. James, the burial site of St. James the Apostle.
So you observed that holiday as a family?
Not always. It was funny. It would depend. Some years we did it more in later years than earlier years.
Personal question about you. Would you describe yourself as a lark or an owl? Are you a morning person or a night person?
I'm a morning person. Yeah. Definitely a morning person.
And that hasn't changed since since active service has been.
No. I still get up, reasonably early and get out and get things done.
You mentioned your father was a soccer enthusiast. You didn't have a particular interest in sports, did you?
No. I think the things that happened to me very early on, they discovered, that I wasn't seeing well. I discovered that in elementary school, very early on, and I kept squinting at things, and I had moved me up, went to and they found out that I had extreme myopia, that really very, very short-sighted. And so I had to wear glasses, very early on. And I know something about the first few times that I was involved in some sports activities, I managed to break my glasses each time.
Oh, boy.
Okay, and that was not cheap.
That's a great deterrent.
And that became a kind of a deterrent to get involved in it. And it isn't like nowadays they have contacts and they have all kinds of special gear for glasses. They didn't have anything. You wore your glasses, you didn't wear your glasses. If I didn't wear my glasses, I couldn't see what I was doing.
What about toys? Were there favorite toys or toys that stand out in memory as things that you love to play with?
Not really. I really would. My favorite thing was always either drawing or reading. Okay. I had an extensive comic book collection that, was, I guess a lot of the kids in those days, we were, we read books as well. I mean, because Mom and Dad made sure that I followed through in school, and then they would buy me, books that were appropriate to my age level. But we all read I had stacks of comic books I can remember.
Oh, if you only had them today.
Oh, right? God, yes. Man, a lot of them are worth money. I had the original Batman, I remember that.
Do you?
Yeah, I had number 1, I remember that.
What's your favorite season of the year? Or do you have one?
Well, I think let me say this. I prefer warmer weather to colder weather. So I usually like from about mid-spring through the beginning of fall, early fall best. From mid-fall on and winter, when it starts to get cold and nasty, I'm not too much in love with that.
I'm just thinking now how...
although I get more painting done.
You do? Yes, sure. I'm just thinking how sometimes the seasons bring with them various aromas that elicit childhood memories or early memories, as does, for example, your mother and her cooking and certain... Are there aromas that will snap you right back when you detect them?
Chestnuts, roasting chestnuts. Okay. We used to go into the city a lot in the fall, and I remember the vendors out in the streets there with the braziers full of roasting chestnuts, and I always associate that with fall in the city.
Do you have any recollection of your first day of school?
No, not really. I have to be honest.
Okay. Yeah. All right. No. Well. What school would have been the first school that you attended?
PS 151 in Woodside, Queens was the first school that I went to.
And you've already mentioned having some of the teachers that have had significant impact on your life. Did you have a favorite or a least favorite subject in school?
Math.
I did. Obviously high on the list of favorites.
High on the list. Everything, math. I always thought in later years that it may have been because I felt that math was so self-contained and always had to be either right or wrong. And art wasn't that way. It just kept. There were endless possibilities. Creativity, you could go in any direction, and there wasn't a right or wrong answer in it. It was the answer you evolved, and I think maybe, subconsciously, that turned me off to math. I mean, it was just either right or it was wrong, okay? And it was a formula. Now, I know when you get up into higher maths, it gets very creative and stuff, but, I never got that. Now, I always did well. I always did well in it. I mean, it wasn't that but I never cared for it. I mean, I would do it as a chore. I would do it as well as I could, but it was a chore.
Was not your first choice.
Oh, God, no.
Where did you go to high school then?
William Cullen Bryan, again in Woodside.
Now, take us through the rest of your formal education. When you completed high school?
Completed high school, I went on to Pratt Institute. I got a BFA in, as I said before, as an illustrator and advertising. Then I went into the advertising field, and I was doing very well as an artist illustrator. But I also apparently had a great many organizational skills. I'd always been able to get things organized and done on time or even ahead of time. And so because of that, I was promoted to being an art director. And then I had to come in contact with the clients and the corporate execs that were doing the counts, and I hated it because it became such a money, and it's not whether it's artistic or not. It's we want it done this way because we think it'll influence people in the way we want to influence them, and it just rubbed me the wrong way. And so I began to almost get physically ill. I was working on ulcers. I was trying to do the job, do it well. And my doctor had told me, you've got to do something to get yourself out of this kind of train of thought. It's not doing you any good. He said, well, Brian, why don't you go and take a couple of courses at college?
I'll be darned.
Okay, take something that's completely out of the realm of what you do, but something that might interest you.
Yeah.
Very funny story. From Midtown, it was very close to Hunter College. So I got this book, that has all of the synopses of what was going on. I went to registration. I'm standing on a line alphabetically, having the foggiest idea of what I'm going to take. And I tapped this young lady in front of me and I said, what are you taking? And she said, oh, I'm taking educational psychology and educational philosophy. I said, what numbers are those? And she gave me the numbers. And so when I came up, I took those two courses. And I did very well. I enjoyed them immensely. And then again, I had both professors said, you're not going into education? I said, no, I'm just taking this as a holiday. And they said, well, you're missing the boat because you're a natural teacher. You are a natural teacher. You have all of the instincts. And that started me thinking.
Yes.
So then I went full-time to New York University to do two things, get my teaching certification, at the same time get my master's degree. So I got a boom.
What was the master's degree in, Manny?
It was in art ed as well.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I had, through a contact at NYU, I had an offer of a position out in Berkeley, in California, being they were starting up a design department, that would specialize a lot in graphic and commercial design, and they wanted someone who had experience in the field and also knew something about ed. And I was going to go out there. In the meantime, the former coordinator.
This had to be in the late 50s.
This was the late 50s, right? Yeah. The former, years ago, the coordinator of art for the Brentwood School District was a girl by the name of Peggy Bingham. And she was in one of my courses in NYU. And we got to talking over coffee and stuff about problems she was having in high school curriculum. And she asked me if I would come out and speak because they're particularly weak in dealing with the commercial art areas. So I came out to Brentwood.
There's the Brentwood connection.
Right. And I lectured a few times, worked with the kids, got involved, and they asked me to help them with the decorations for the senior prom, which was in the gym in Ross Building in those days. And I did. And I was invited then by the senior class to come to the prom, which I did. And unbeknownst to me, they, Mr. Weaver, the principal, and Mrs. Knott, the associate principal, had talked with Peggy, and she had said to them, "You really ought to hire this gentleman for the art department." They had an opening, so I was called out of the prom into the office with Mr. Weaver and offered a contract, which threw me because I wasn't expecting this. I was, as far as I was concerned, I was committed to Berkeley. Yes. And suddenly here was a contract, okay? And they really poured it on about how much the kids liked me, how much I had done for them, this and the other thing. And I signed. I figured, well, all right, what I'll do is I'll do some missionary work for a few years, try and get the department squared away, and then I'll go out to Berkeley. 32 years later, I retired from Brentwood.
Do you remember what the bottom line on that contract was? You remember how much you made?
Oh, God.
That first year?
I used to remember that. It was such a small amount of money, John. I thought I was going to starve to death after the money I'd been making in Harvard.
Oh, I'm sure.
$4,500 with the master's. I think it was something like that.
Before taxes.
Yeah. Yes. Right. $4,500. I believe it was with a master's degree.
Oh.
And I had been making $18,000 in advertising, which in those days was a huge amount of money.
Lord. Boy, oh boy. Okay. You signed the contract. Where are you living now? At that moment,
I was living in Forest Hills, in my parents' place, and then I decided, okay, well, that was impractical to commute. So Mrs. Knott, who was the assistant principal, had a cottage on her property, which she sometimes rented out, and it was available. So she rented it out to me, and it was right over here on Grant Avenue. And that I stayed there for 3 years, and I moved to a duplex apartment in Iceland, in Iceland.
What were your first impressions of Brentwood when you arrived here and took up residence here? And what do you remember? What do you remember about those?
Well, compared to the city, it seemed very, very rural. Yes. Okay, I mean,
but it was rural.
It was, yeah. And but I enjoyed it. I mean, it was very nice. A lot of greenery. People were very pleasant. You couldn't go out without people saying hi. How are you? What are you doing? I liked the fact that it reminded me in very much of my early days in Queens, because again, it was a multi-ethnic population. Okay, and it had for that time, it had a large Hispanic population, although, and so I was able to communicate with many of the kids in Spanish in school, which surprised them. They didn't expect me to. Yes. I guess for the foreign language people, nobody else spoke a foreign language.
Oh, especially in those days too.
So that was kind of fun. So I had a good time, and after the first year, I attracted a lot of Hispanic kids to the art department because the word got around. Yes. And they were very talented. It wasn't that they were doing there because they thought they were going to just kind of sit around and do nothing. They worked very hard, and they were very talented kids. But I redid the whole curriculum. I remember in the first year, I rewrote the entire high school curriculum, every course.
I dare say there wasn't much curriculum in those early days.
It was really catch as catch you can.
Sure.
And we had very odd things. For instance, the first year, I taught 2 different classes in the same period. I was teaching advertising design, and there were 15 kids taking advertising, and then there was fashion design, and there was 16 kids taking that.
Oh.
And so I had to divide them, not just physically, but I had to work out a curriculum so that as I was doing, except for the very beginning, doing a motivation for one, the others were finishing a project, so I could kind of rotate and give my time and attention back and forth to 2 distinct curriculums. It was tough. It was tough, but it worked. It worked. I mean, we got some good stuff done. Then that very first year, I also came up with the concept of there was so much talent, and we really had no vehicle for displaying the talent other than on the bulletin boards in the room or a few out in the hall. So I invented the district art show.
Yes.
Okay. And I said that at an art department meeting of the entire district, which we used to have. I said, why don't we do this? And everyone thought it was a good idea, but the logistics of it seemed horrendous. So Ms. Bingham put me in charge of doing it, and I borrowed panels from the town of Islip. I got the industrial arts to print posters for us, which all our kids designed. We got some refreshments, and we did it lined up through PTA and parents of the kids. I got some of the kids trained as hosts and hostesses. We got a little flyer printed up, with like a program, and we held it in the R.O.B.S building. And it was as you walk in the R.O.B.S by the auditorium, it was down that hallway and into the 2 cafeterias and part of that hallway there. That was the extent of it, and it was the entire district. But that was as much as we could do, and it was funny because we had to set it up on a Thursday night after school. The show opened Friday, and parents could come in all during the day. And the biggest problem was the cafeterias. We had to keep everything out of the cafeteria in the hallway until after the cafeteria, and then shove the stuff back into the cafeteria. And then people could come Friday night, they could come Saturday, and then Sunday we had to take it down because school had to resume on
logistics.
On
oh my goodness, yeah.
But we did it.
I can remember when the Sondling building opened, and you had a lot of the paper mache animals.
Right.
Magnificent. Right. And that tradition survives to this day.
Today, except what we did is finally, as the district grew, we finally had 22,000 kids, and we just could not put the whole exhibition together. It got too large. So we split it, and we had the secondary as one exhibition, and the elementary as another exhibition, and that's the way it's still done now. And of course, now the final phase, I moved it out of there. We used to do it in the schools. We'd rotate it in the schools. And then that became a problem because I'd always have to steal the gymnasium in a school for a week. And that wasn't really fair to phys ed. So I finally, when we got into the new administration building, I finally talk the superintendent and the board into letting us have it, that gym and the hallways and everything where it is now. And then it didn't bother anybody.
When you were teaching, were you always teaching seniors and juniors, or were you in the 10th?
No, I did 10, 11, and 12.
10, 11, and 12.
Yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Some of the early years that you mentioned, Burl Knott and Fred Weaver being here, who were some of the other people that you had occasion to work with who were probably nearing retirement at that point?
Nearing retirement. Well, the district superintendent, Gene Hoyt.
Yes.
Mr. Hastings, who and Lee Stewart, who were in charge of all of the other things in the district. The attendance and the personnel and curriculum. Their watch was a time of enormous growth for this district.
Never having had anything like that in their entire lives to deal with, it must have been an overwhelming task.
It was. It always seemed that we were having to put up another building or worry about how the population was exploding. They finally
a crisis mentality almost. It was like dealing with because everything was unexpected.
But at the same time, what it allowed us to do, I think, is it gave us, because Gene Hoyt was he was a very innovative superintendent. He thought it was a perfect opportunity for us to get on top of new ideas in curriculum and how to deal more effectively. Because with all these kids coming in, and coming in so rapidly, you couldn't do the old tried and true. There was too much change. And so we got onto the Piaget and cognition and Brunner and the spiraling curriculum, and the Ford program, in which Ford gave us a grant to develop curriculum based on Piaget and Brunner for K through 12. And I remember a number of books came out of that were used first in the district, and then some of them were later adapted for commercial use outside of the district.
There were a number of books outside of that. Wasn't it Coming of Age in America, a book that dealt with Milgram?
Right. Coming of Age in America, and then you had Future Shock, and books by Maslow and Toffler,
Mm-hmm.
So there were all kinds of things. But I remember it was a very exciting time. Went hours and hours and hours with this, and I remember there were so many books, and all these books had to be illustrated. And you, in order to save money, if you had to go out and try and either photograph or go into archives and collect photographs, you would spend a great deal of money for the rights. So they asked me if I would illustrate all of these books, and under the Ford Foundation grant. So I did. I was just, after I got through with my day teaching and doing it, I'd go home and I was drawing and drawing and drawing and drawing. That went on for several years.
You've worn so many hats, so many assignments, so many different responsibilities, programs, and involvements over the years. I don't know where to begin to ask you to tell us about, but some of the things that you remember, maybe you can highlight for us.
Okay, well, let's see. After believe it or not, I was only in the classroom for 3 years. At the end, and during the third year, they had already made me department head of the art department. There were only 3 teachers, so it was no huge department. But then they had brought in Joe Dion, Dr. Dion, to head up curriculum, because Dr. Hoyt was getting involved in all this creative ideas and programs, and they needed somebody to deal with that. And he came in, and he came up with the concept of a GIS, a General Instructional Supervisor. Instead of trying to have department heads always go around to their own people, he wanted generalists, rather especially wanted people who understood what good education was in the classroom. Forget about the details of a particular subject, but what made good teaching, what made effective teaching, interaction with students and the presenting of material. And they asked me to be one of these people at the high school, and they gave me English and Social Studies, which were the 2 largest departments at that time. And John, I believe you were there.
Yes.
And it was controversial because my background, although I had been a minor in social studies at college, and I wrote well, I didn't have any problem, I was an extensive reader, I'd never supervised English and social studies teachers, nor their curriculum. But I did it, and I tried to make a difference, and I'm still told by some of the people at that time that it was a very positive step in turning the departments around and getting some excitement going and some curriculum changes. And,
Manny, who were some of the other people who occupied a similar role? GIS.
Jerry Coates was my counterpart in math and science. Mm-hmm. And then there was a number of them throughout the district. And I've got to be frank, there were so many of them, I'm drawing a blank. Jerry and I, interacted on a daily basis. So,
and then Dr. Dion left Brentwood eventually to go to McGraw-Hill, where he, I don't know if he's still active in that role. I suspect
he's on the board. Mm-hmm. He's on the board now.
Okay.
Yeah. I still hear from them every Christmas.
Do you?
Yeah.
Now what happened next after that?
After that, I was in that for several years, and then the art coordinatorship opened, and that was my first love, and I applied for that, and I got that. I think that was 67, 68, something like that. And then in the course of now having to redo the entire district, I had redone the high school, but now in getting and taking a close look at the elementary and the junior high art program, I was unhappy. Again, it was pretty much teach your whatever you thought you wanted to do, you did, but there was no real curriculum. So I sat down and I began to write curriculum, and it took me several years, but I wrote, finally I had a K-12 curriculum written and tested by teachers. I mean, I'd go and I'd say, look, these are some ideas. These are some sample lessons. And I picked staff that I thought would, and they would give me feedback on how well it went or I'd make some changes. So it was tested and then revamped. And but finally I had what I felt was a really good, solid curriculum.
I suspect this is well before the state even came.
Oh yeah.
Came down.
Oh no, state had nothing.
The state had nothing.
State had a book, and their curriculum consisted of telling you what media was good for what age level. Okay. And that's what it amounted, and showing you pictures of things that were done around the state. Mm-hmm. That's what it really was. There was no curriculum.
So you were well ahead then of
as a matter of fact, the state asked to see my curriculum. The word got out through other local art people that I would give copies of the curriculum to, and then I sent it up to the state, and then I got involved with the state that way. Then somewhere along the line here, now I guess we're going into the early 70s. We were so overpopulated. Now Guy, by that point, I guess was superintendent of schools, Guy DiPietro. We needed space, and we just didn't have it. And he came up with the concept as the federal government was giving a grant to reconvert school buildings into other functions or renovate them and whatnot. And he came up with the concept to help us with, we needed, elementaries overcrowded, junior highs were now getting the spillover of creating 7th grade centers. So Northwest Elementary School was going to be renovated from an elementary school to a secondary school, and then the East School on the other end of town was also going to be a 7th grade. We needed 2 of them to house just the 7th grade to get the junior highs off of split session. Meanwhile, high school was still on split session.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you've ever been involved with the federal government, John, but the stuff that you have to go, they give you these things that you have to document for them. And the document itself may be 8 pages, but the amount of exhibits that have to accompany everything on this 8-page document is unbelievable.
Yes.
Well, Guy said, Manny, do it for me. And so I spent months getting this together. I mean, I knew Brentwood better than anyone else in Brentwood. I had to we couldn't even find blueprints for some of the buildings. I needed a blueprint for every building, the way it was now. And some of them, we had them, but had been changes and additions, and I had to go on a floor plan and add them on myself so that it would be, I wouldn't even get it. Anyway, to make a long story short, I remember having, on the day they had to present, a guy wanted me to be in Philadelphia on the day that the federal office opened to receive these accounts. And I remember having to go to New York City the night before and stay at this hotel right opposite Grand Central, not Grand Central, Penn Station.
Penn Station, right.
So that I could get on the 6 o'clock train to Philadelphia. I think the federal office is open at 8. And I got to the federal building and up to the office there. I guess it was it wasn't quite 7:30 I was there.
Wow.
And John, there were already 11 people in front of me.
Oh my.
Now, I figured they must have been more local.
Yes.
So I was the 12th person online.
Wow.
We went in, I got handed in all the stuff. called guy from the railroad station and said, it's in. He said, well, we number 1. And I remember saying to him, no, we were number 12. He said, damn. I said, I tried. I mean, some of these people have to be local guys.
Yes, oh God.
And he laughed. He just thought that we had worked this out, that we would be the first ones knocking on the federal door. Okay, the long and the short of that was that we didn't make it on the first round. I mean, I don't know how many thousands of these things were turned around. So, but there was a part 2, which I had to upgrade, which wasn't as big a task. A few months later, I had to upgrade with some additional things for it, and we did get the grant on the second time around. Mm-hmm. And then later, of course, the building was again refurbished when it became a 9th grade center. I mean, we added onto that.
How fortunate for him that he had you and your talent to accomplish that. I'll tell you.
I don't know. He was the most remarkable person educationally I ever met. He was just unbelievable. I've never met another superintendent of schools like him. He had a mind like a steel trap. He could absorb anything. He asked you when he wanted to know something he knew you a lot of. He'd say, "Give me a mini course in a half hour. Tell me the most important." And you'd sit there and you'd enumerate this, that, or the other thing. And he'd sit there and he'd listen. Every once in a while, he'd ask you a question for clarification, and that was it. And I'd seen him do it. He'd go to a meeting 2 hours later, and he'd knock off the most salient points on that thing as if he was born with them.
Yes,
he just could retain it all and absorb it and put it in its proper perspective.
Yeah, those people who never had the opportunity to meet him, work with him, or get to know him, missed an incredible opportunity as far as a unique educator is concerned, because he combined so many different talents. And then at the end was going to law school while being a superintendent to become an attorney.
Exactly.
Because he never asked a question that he didn't have an answer for already.
Right.
And I said I wasn't going to talk, but I was.
That's okay. It's hard not to when you talk about Guy. I guess the next big thing with Guy was when he got the vision for the 5-year plan. I believe that was maybe 82 or 83. It was in the early 80s anyway, where he felt that we had to do something to boost the curriculum again and make some changes architecturally for the needs. And I remember him. I used to stay late in a day or come in early in the morning, normally either one. And that's when he and I used to talk, because the office is quiet. There aren't phones ringing, people running around. And he told me about this concept. And he said, let me just ask you one thing. How would you bring, if I said to you, how would you bring, and talk about way ahead of time, bridge to the 21st century, how would you bring art to the 21st century if you had the wherewithal? And I remember saying, without blinking an eye, I said, first of all, we'd have to get involved in the mass media like television. I said, because there's a thing where more and more art jobs are being called for, and it has so many ramifications. He said, okay, well, that's part of the thing. We're going to do this. And so I was one of the people that was instrumental in developing all the curriculum aspects. And the studio today is an outgrowth. Although this is the first studio we had was a storage room in one of the older art rooms. But and then continuing on that, I got onto computer graphics when I saw that was going in the same way. A guy had already passed on, and we got onto that. Yes. And today we have an excellent computer graphics program as well.
And following with Guy's unfortunate passing,
when he died, I was asked to take over because I'd been so instrumental in working so often troubleshooting curriculum for him in the various levels, as well as writing a great deal of curriculum. I was asked to be curriculum coordinator for all subject areas in the district, and I took it with the provision that I would still be coordinator of art. Mm-hmm. I said, I've worked too long, and it's something that's going to help me keep my sanity to deal with an area that I dearly love and want to keep growing and moving in the direction. But I would be happy to deal with all of the other areas. And so that was somewhere around 84, 85, I think, something like that. I did. And then I had to work out a schedule. It worked out about 65% of my time I would do the district thing, and maybe 35% of my time I would do the art. But I had the art program running so well that I could afford to take time away from it to devote to the district.
And the 80s were some financially or fiscally very difficult times. So
problems.
they were eliminating positions left and right, more and more responsibilities being given to
compacted. And so and that economically made sense. I was holding 2 positions for the price of 1.
Yes, yeah. And I guess that continued pretty much up until the national economy began to change.
Right.
And when would that have been? In the early 90s?
It was the early 90s, really, that we began to see some turnaround. I mean, meanwhile, we had lost a great deal of population. From 22,000, we had gone down to, I don't know, our lowest had maybe 9,000 somewhere, and that's a huge drop. So we had sold off one of our the elementary schools, to Entenmann's Bakery. That was the South Elementary School. When we came with the kindergarten curriculum, the 7th grade center became a kindergarten center, which it is to this day. Northwest changed from a 7th grade to a 9th grade. We finally got off split sessions and everything moved well. I guess in that period, one of the things that I started with Guy, but I pushed it as I was as curriculum coordinator, is I had suggested at that time to Guy that we really ought to do more to have the board and the community be aware of what was happening in curriculum areas. So we began these curriculum presentations in the evening.
Yes.
And originally they were like slideshows, something so that would be graphic, and then we had the kids come in. Then we got into video presentations, and that's still going on.
Yes.
And part of it was to say, well, this is what's happening in your schools. And it was really a modern offshoot of Brentwood As Many Kids. Okay, I was just trying to re-adopt the concept for the facilities and what we had available. But I thought it was important for the community to continually know where we were.
Brentwood finally got out of austerity.
Yes.
That also has been a godsend to the district and to a lot of the management end of a lot of it. You, however, decided you decided at some point, I guess, that it was time for you.
I had always, John, thought that that one of the saddest things that I could remember about educators was there got to be times when you knew an administrator or a teacher really was over the hill, that they were marking time, that they were no longer being the very positive force educationally that they should be. They were not being a facilitator or an educator. They were just kind of marking time and doing the same thing over and over and over, waiting for whatever that magic day was to retire. And I had always said to myself, I am not going to do that. When I want to retire, when I'm still creative, when I'm still positive, when I'm making a definite contribution to the school district. But when I know that in order to continue to make a contribution, because I always worked in long time slots too, like Guy too, I always worked in 5-year periods. And I said, when I get to the end of a period and know that to do the next 5 years is really going to be beyond what I think I'm going to be able to do and do as well as I would like to, I want to leave.
Okay.
And so I made that decision, came to a period and I said, okay, I'm finishing everything that is currently important to me. I will now have to move into the next 5, and a lot of things I've been going will take more than 5 years to accomplish. And I think now's the time for me to go out, hopefully on a positive note.
And what year was that you?
93.
Okay. Now, every job that you've ever held pretty much has had a job description attached to it somewhere, but that's not the question. Outside of the description of your various roles, how did you define your purpose throughout all of the years?
I always thought of myself basically because so much of my time was spent with teachers and students not in the classroom, but outside the classroom, or if it was in the classroom, I was acting as an intermediary, as a facilitator. Mm-hmm. That my job, a facilitator and a creator of materials that would help people do the job the best way they could. And so I always looked at myself as someone who was trying to see as many ways as possible that I could work with an individual, whether it was a student or a faculty member or an administrator, that I could make their job easier by providing them with materials, with some counseling, with some constructive criticism, some examples, whatever ways or number of ways I could stretch myself, so that they would be able to enhance whatever they were doing, their performance.
And over the years, the answer to the question is obvious. You had a lot of contact with former students, as well as former teachers of your own. I suspect that you kept in touch for a while, at least with some of your own. You were initially a member of the teaching staff here, but then as you assumed more and more supervisory roles, I can only assume that you became a member of BIPSO.
Yeah.
And were you active at all in the organization?
At the very beginning, I was. I was secretary. I was a vice president of BIPSO at the time when they were first formulating it, and we were in the first negotiations. I mean, in the first 3 years of the Taylor Law, I remember being on the negotiating team, which was a whole different experience. It's funny though. I always felt that an administrator was simply another form of being a teacher. You might be teaching in a different arena, but the objectives, if you were really doing a job, were the same. You were going to teach other people how to deal effectively with kids. And anyway,
No, I like what you're saying, because it confirms what I believe, and that is when you are teaching a student, you have the benefit of experience that you cannot convey. You have to communicate somehow from another reality. And when you become an administrator, you see things in a very different frame of reference, and very often your staff may not see it the same way because they're looking at it through a different vision.
Particularly if you're a K-12 administrator, where you're seeing all ends of the spectrum, from the youngest children that we deal with to the oldest. You get an entirely different eye. You see a continuum that's impossible at times to talk about to an individual teacher, because they're seeing one small part of the which is an important part. But you're seeing it in relationship to what came before and what should be coming afterwards.
There have been 32 years, you said?
32 years.
Throughout those 32 years, more than a generation of wonderful experiences, a lot of lovable characters. I'm calling them lovable characters. We've all known many different characters. I don't know if there are any stories, with or without names, that you'd like to share, or if there are simply individuals that made a lasting mark on your memory that you can.
Well, I'll tell you one small child story, which to this day I laugh every time I think about it. I was in a kindergarten classroom, and kids were dealing with very large animals, and they were spread out on the floor. And one of the things I learned about dealing with very young children is I never wanted to tower above them. So I always used to either kneel down, or in this case, kids were painting on the floor, I lay down next to this little kid who was painting a big pig. I mean, I could tell it was a pig. And we were talking, and of course the art teacher was getting a big kick out of this, but I wanted to see from his perspective, this little child's perspective, what was going on. And he had a bunch of interesting colored dots around this pig. And I always say, I always say, what is this? And I was saying, I love that this is a very good pig. And the little kid said, I know. I said, good. He's self-confident. I said, and I love the colors that you have here. These really give the pig a happy day. And the child looked at me and said, those are her children. And I said, oh. And then the child says, and she's a very good mother, too. And I said, oh, I'm sure she is. Great. So there's little stories like this all the time. And I loved to deal with the kids. With administrators and teachers, there are lots of funny stories, but I think I'll skip them because there's so many of them. That, I'll turn into a Henny Youngman one-liner.
Of all your professional accomplishments, which of them are you the most proud?
I don't know if there's one particular accomplishment that I would say, oh, this was it. This was my crowning glory. I think the thing that I was proudest of was that when it was all over and retired, I could look myself in the mirror and say, I did the best I could, and I think I did. I think I made a contribution. I think that was the thing that I feel the greatest sense of satisfaction about.
Is there one thing that you could point at, perhaps, that said in all of those years, the thing that gave you the most pleasure was?
Well, I guess it would be having created what I consider probably the finest art department in the state in the public school.
What you've probably answered this, Manny. Your last assignment that you had before retiring,
the curriculum coordinator.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. What have you been doing since retirement?
Oh, since retirement, I've gone back to my my love, and I draw and paint every day. I spend some time in the studio, and I've had several shows. One in New York City in the Casa Galicia, which is the association, Spanish association for people from the region my mother and father come from. I've had several shows in Sable. There's another one coming up in October. And I have tried to get out and go to museums as frequently as I can, go to theater as often as I can, socialize with friends and family, and have some quality time.
You sound like you've had no difficulty whatsoever in making this transition. Would that be accurate?
That's accurate. And I think the trick in retirement is you have got to have built interests before that will carry you. Otherwise, your time is going to be dead weight on your hands.
Yes. You never had time for any second or part-time jobs while you were doing all of these.
Oh, no.
Because many teachers, many people, as you know, did have second jobs.
Yes, I know.
Yours was a total, complete commitment to what you were doing.
And work after school or in the evenings or even on weekends. I even had kids on independent assignment when I was an administrator, so I was still actively teaching there. And obviously, the only times I could teach them would be at night, on holidays, or weekends. And so that's when I would teach them.
In hindsight, is there anything you look back over the years, is there anything that you wish you had done differently or you would like to do a retake on if you could?
Oh, God. I can't pinpoint one particular thing. The only thing I would say in general, sometimes the things that come to me and I would say, I wish I had handled this particular person in a somewhat different manner. Maybe I could have gotten more out of them. Maybe I could have made, their life a little easier. Maybe I didn't find exactly the right key.
Eva, our librarian, has asked me to include this of everyone. What's one of the most important books that you've ever read, or one of the books that has had a profound effect on your life?
Oh boy.
She would like to be able to recommend to students books that have profoundly affected us.
Okay, I'll give you two. one from a cultural heritage, Don Quixote. And I had read it in English, and then I decided I was going to read it in the original Spanish. And it's over 1,000 pages, wow. And it is in the equivalent of Elizabethan Spanish. It's like reading Shakespeare in Spanish, because that's a lot of would that he might do this, a lot of subjunctive mood. And I made myself, it took me almost a year and a half to read it, because I wanted to make sure I was reading it correctly. But the folk wisdom in it, as well as the philosophy behind this man that wants to do nothing but good, but finds himself in a very real world that doesn't understand what altruism is and what values he's projecting, had a profound effect on me. The other thing I think goes along with it, I can't pick any one, but Shakespeare, for me, was always one of the highest watermarks. I can't tell you how much pleasure I've derived over the years in reading Shakespearean works.
You've answered a question that I haven't even asked you. Who has been at least one of your heroes over the course of your life? And it strikes me that from literature, at least, Don Quixote would have been one.
Yes, he's definitely.
What are you going to miss, Manny, about active service? Or what have you already felt a sense of longing
Working
for?
with the kids. Working with the kids.
And I don't have to ask, I think, what you don't or won't miss about active service.
I don't. The stresses and tensions that come about that are lots of times they come about through misunderstandings and people's fears and people having vested interests in things, and so they make problems where problems really shouldn't be, and that kind of thing I really don't miss.
Is there anything that you would like to have accomplished before you left that you just felt you didn't either have sufficient time, energy, or resources to see achieved?
No, as I said before, I pretty well felt that everything that I could do, I had done, and that I was going to have to take another very big creative leap to move into a new phase. And so I said before I do that, because it's too long a time commitment.
You want to try to comment before, we're nearing the end of our time together, obviously, and I just wondered if you wanted to try to comment on what is happening now. The state, of course, is increasing the bar for not just students, but for faculty and school districts as well. That's going to, it seems to me, have a profound impact.
Oh, I think curriculum, everyone's going to have to take a very new look at how we're dealing with curriculum for kids of all kinds of ability levels. Otherwise, and the methods by which we deliver that curriculum to the kids. Otherwise, I think it's going to be a disaster for many youngsters, and very traumatic to try and get through these regencies. And the problem is, we keep being compared with Europe or Asia, and their system of education is so completely different. It's like you're doing apples and pears. They have a very distinct separation of students. They say, okay, these are academically gifted and are going on to the university, so we're going to train them one way. And they make the decision around the time kids are junior high age. And these youngsters don't seem to have that bent, so we're going to train them for vocational education and the workforce. And so when you're comparing our grades and our capabilities in this, you're talking about a very homogeneous population that they're dealing with, because they've made separations. And ours, you're talking about a much wider ability mix. And unless we're willing to do that and say we're going to change our whole system of education, then we have to be much more creative in terms of dealing with curriculum and interaction and motivation.
And how many different language groups does Brentwood have today?
Oh gosh, I don't know, but I'll bet we must have at least 6 or 8 different languages spoken in Brentwood.
30 years ago or more, the country as well as this district faced major educational issues that we were among the first to have to deal with because of the rapid growth and the changes in the community. Seems nothing has changed. We are still on the cutting edge of change, and for many people represent the teaching example or model for the rest of the country, not only on the island, but look to Brentwood for the answers.
Yeah, we've always been.
And we don't have all the answers.
No, we didn't. Nobody has all the answers. They did, we wouldn't have the problems.
Yes.
But Brentwood has always been, and that's been one of the joys of being in the district, despite problems economically and logistically. Brentwood has always been a district committed to trying to do something new, to look at how we were doing it and find out if there were better ways of dealing with the situation, both curriculum and interaction-wise with students and teachers and administrators.
I used to say that there must be something in the air, and it predates Entenmann's, that the idealism of this community from the 1840s and thereafter has permeated the way people think. And the draw, which was an active recruitment of minorities to this community, unlike so many other towns on Long Island, makes us distinctly unique and a wonderful role model, I think. Manny, I don't know if there's other things that we have forgotten. I'm sure there is, and we'll remember them as soon as we walk out that door.
Probably. But on the other hand, we don't want to turn this into Gone with the Wind either. 4 hours of Tara's theme.
I can only thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this project, and thank our viewers for watching, and for your family that I hope will enjoy this when they have an opportunity.
I hope so. I'm sure they'll be critical of my answers, but it'll be okay. Thanks a lot, John. I appreciate it. Thank you for inviting me.